Hi, I'm Danny Johnson. Welcome to the Danny Johnson Show, and this is the Danny Johnson Show crew. Okay, listen, we just did a total spontaneous thing. This is the famous Trisha.
Yes.
She is the writer of the show, and this is the brilliant, gorgeous Rachel, who is the producer of the show.
And this is the star.
Whatever. Anyway, so the bottom line is that when I was looking at the show prep and they had a whole lot to say about it, I said, come on in. Let's just throw this together. She's like, but who's going to time you? Who's going to record? I'm like, who cares? We're just going to let everyone know that we're watching the clock right here. We're just throwing this together, totally spontaneous, not planned. In fact, Rachel's like, do you have any powder? My hair's free. She did everything she could to try to get out of this thing. And by the way, this is my beautiful, beautiful daughter-in-law also, she's like the biggest dream come true ever. She really, really is. And Trisha also. She has been absolutely phenomenal to work with as such an answer to prayer, Trisha.
She's amazing.
You really are. Oh my gosh, so incredibly No, I'm serious. I prayed for 2 years for you. I never told you that. I prayed for 2 years for you.
Wow.
So God really delivered you to us. Okay, so Trisha's the one who came up with today. She comes up with every day except for the spiritual equippings that come up with those messages. So go ahead. Why don't you just lead right into what our conversation is going to be? Because we're going to start some wars.
We're going to talk about how to make money doing full-time ministry. And what does that mean?
Get a job.
Probably does. That's what I wrote on the show prep. Get a job.
Did you really?
Yeah.
She really did.
Yes. Get a job. With a period.
Okay, so let's talk about this. Trisha, tell me what spurred you to want to have this conversation.
So I worked for a church. I worked for a church for 2.5 years, and when I graduated from college, that was what I thought full-time ministry was you get a job and you work for a church, you work for a nonprofit that, were Christian, and that was it. That was all that you could do to help people. And the more that I worked at that job, and it was wonderful, I loved it, I had a great experience, amazing coworkers, but the more that I was there, the more that I saw that ministry was about so much more than what you did, for a job. It was the way that you interacted with people. It was the way that you loved on people. Your whole life is sharing the gospel.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a job.
Yeah.
So tell me what drew you, did your mom tell you? Because we have this comment that you put in here, which is so interesting, right? And it's kind of a sad thing how parents can do this. I can't even pronounce her name. That's an amazing name. And she's one of our top fans. I wish I could pronounce the name.
Me too.
But anyway, she says, so the question that you asked to our audience was what? What do you consider full-time ministry?
Right.
And so her mom told her since she was a little girl, you are called to full-time ministry. Well, that's total programming, but what does that look like? What does full-time ministry look like? And the thing that I found in my career was that I had church programming as an adult, right? So that if I wasn't a full-time pastor, then I wasn't super uber special in the kingdom of heaven. Yeah. But I'm just a layman in the kingdom of heaven. And I don't really have a place. I don't have a right to teach the Bible. I'm not qualified to talk about the Bible. I'm not qualified to pray for anyone. I'm not, especially because of my past was disgusting, so disgusting. Okay, I'm a former hoe. I'm a former druggie. I was a former homeless woman. Okay, I mean, I'd been raped and gang raped, which is not funny. But anyway, the point is that I just was not, I wasn't qualified. So I didn't go to seminary. To die spiritually. But no, seriously. So I really was under this impression that, okay, there's full-time ministry. So if I'm going to serve God, that means I have to work for a church organization or I'm nothing. I'm just a layman over here and I really don't love God and my life isn't dedicated to him. But I know where I got that idea from. Where did you get the idea that to serve God meant that you had to work for a church?
I don't think that it was from my parents. I think it was when I didn't have to go to church anymore, I was raised Catholic, but when I didn't have to go to church anymore, I didn't. I just stopped going. So it's not that I didn't believe in God. I wasn't getting anything out of church. So when I came to a point in my life where things were really hard, I didn't, kind of at the end of my rope, what do? I went back to church. And I through doing that, ended up at a summer camp that was a Christian summer camp. So I'm around all these kids that did have that programming from like, and all of them talking about like full-time ministry, right? And so I think that, and I was like, yes, this is great. I'm going to serve Jesus. And so I kind of got on that high, that kick.
So what we've experienced with people who go into full-time ministry, I'm going to talk from a business perspective, what my personal experience is with people who've gone into full-time ministry and how much time they've spent there. But I wanted Rachel, because Rachel started going, I got something about that. So go ahead.
There's this particular individual that I'm friends with, and literally, like, I just scrolled back through some messages, and literally the last 4 messages they've been sent over the past like 2 years. There was 4 messages in the past 2 years, all just this totally generic, obviously like copied and pasted and sent to everyone that they had contact information for, and it was just like, hey, I'm doing this trip, mission, work thing, whatever you want to call it, and I would really love your support in, like, what's the word that they always use?
Mission trip?
For, like, the money, like funding or
Yes.
Support.
Yes,
Raising support.
yes,
Raising
thank you.
support. Yes,
Raising
yes,
support
yes,
for
yes.
this, new journey thing that I'm on, whatever. And I usually just ignore the messages, to be perfectly honest. But if, if they were reaching out to, like, talk to me or have a conversation with me, I would probably respond. But I literally, just before we started recording, just sat on my phone and, like, scrolled back through the messages. And there were 4, like, really long messages just in the past 2 years of them just trying to get me to give them money.
Which is sad.
Yeah, which, like, I've supported, it's not like I don't support my friend. Like, I've donated many, many times to my friends who, are doing these mission trips or doing things. Like, it's not like I'm like, oh, you're a terrible person. Like, how dare you? Like, I do support them. Just a couple weeks ago, actually, I made another donation to one of my friends who's doing something, but it's different than that approach.
So here's what I'm going to tell you from some experience.
Oh my gosh.
Where I have talked to some of these kids, and especially as some of them have become adults and they realized that they needed to, like, start a business or get a job. And here's what I'm going to tell you, what so many of them have confessed to me, was that it pretty much was just funding vacations to foreign countries. And, when I asked them, like, okay, so what did you do? Oh, we taught some, songs, some, like, Sunday school songs. We went and they, like, slaughtered a pig for us, and they made us a big meal, and what did you do? Well, we taught them some songs, and we taught some Bible verses. We did basically a vacation Bible school. I'm like, okay, so you got to go on a $3,000 vacation, and the chief spent his wealth to give you a great meal, and you taught them to sing. Okay. Okay. Sounds like a good deal.
Yeah. Right?
And so I'm just going to I cannot tell you how many people I've talked to. And I know not every missionary is that way, but I've even had some say, man, we just partied. Like, yeah, on the church's donations, we drank, we partied, we went to clubs. Like, they literally was being funded to go on vacation. So I know for you right now, you're like, there's no way that's what's happening with the missionaries. I know. You don't know actually what's happening. And is that really what a missionary is? Is that really what a missionary is? Is that what really a missionary does? And so there's this, like, whole movement that's been going on for a really long time. I mean, at least 20 years that I know of people raising support to have other people support them financially while they go and do what they classify or they think to be something that is spiritual that cannot be done or will not do in the normal everyday life. Even though the Bible is very, very clear that if you don't work, oh no, but I am working. Okay, well, what if work means you're producing something? You're producing something in exchange for money, in exchange for provision for it. And you're like, well, okay, but I am. I'm teaching people to sing songs about Jesus. Okay, that's fine. But let's talk about this, okay? Because Trisha, I love that you wrote this, and I love that you wanted to talk about this, because there really is a big misconception, and it's almost like, okay, I feel called to full-time ministry. Every single one of us are called to full-time ministry.
Yes.
Every single one of us. No matter what is that you do, whether you work under a car all day, under several cars all day, every day. Paul was called to full-time ministry. He was a saddle maker. I know that's a big surprise right now because everyone translated that he was a tent maker. No, he made saddles. And so as a saddle maker, that's what he did every day, all day. And he said that I worked, I labored, and I toiled all day while I preached the gospel. Which shows you that, no, we're supposed to live out our life working. He says, if a man will not work, he then shall not eat. Okay. God blesses the work of your hands. Okay. But we have this kind of movement. It's like this GoFundMe movement. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Yep. To travel to Africa, or to go and travel to Central America or South America or Europe or whatever place that you want to say that there's a need for it, right here in our country, right in your own city, right in your own town, to be honest with you, right in your own house. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right in your own house is a mission field of spreading the love and the freedom of Yeshua, Jesus the Messiah. And so I want to get a little bit deeper on this as to why you felt it was really important, because you also have a couple of stories in here that you felt were important to tell also.
Yeah, so at the last First Steps to Success event, Danny does a couple of things where she pulls people up on stage. And so the guy that got up there with her, like kind of a shy, quiet guy, but he was a business owner, and he had this business, and he worked restoring old government buildings and doing like preventative work on them. Yeah. And his whole thing was providing jobs that gave a good salary so that people could do what they wanted to do. And there was a man who like had paid off his farm and was providing food for his family from his farm, and that was that man's like heart for people, and that is ministry. How is that not ministry?
Yeah, it's actually a real shepherd.
Right.
That's like
ministry.
That is. In the Bible, so like there's one word that was really not translated right. Not one, there's many. But, I was going to say. There's so many that wasn't translated right. But one of them is the word pastor, which actually does not exist in the original transcripts at all. That is a modern word that was used, that a whole profession has been created out of it. But the word pastor doesn't even exist. It's the word shepherd. And there's so much that the Bible talks about shepherd. Like there's so much teaching on it. And it's a business owner is a shepherd. David was a shepherd. Abraham was a shepherd, right? So that was a profession. Mm-hmm. Okay. And those guys were largely very wealthy also. The successful ones were very, very wealthy, as Abraham was very wealthy. In fact, Moses was a shepherd, right? So after he left Egypt, went for 40 years, got married, what did he become? A shepherd. So those who are shepherded and those who are shepherding people, exactly what Ben was talking about. And by the way, Ben grew up as a missionary and he's a business owner today. But his parents were missionaries. And so the whole concept of what Ben saw, right? No, like I want to give provision. I want to give an opportunity for men to provide for themselves, to provide for their families. They could become successful financially so they don't struggle. Well, we know where that was rooted in. Mm-hmm. Sometimes missionary families are suffering financially, like greatly. Totally. And it's to their own doing. It literally is to their own doing, simply because they're not producing something. They're not producing work in exchange for money. And I know I'm making somebody mad right now. No, they're working. Okay, that's great. They have a different definition even than biblically of what work is defined. And that's okay. We've created a whole new profession called a missionary. We've created a whole new profession called pastor. And I know that ruffles a few of your feathers, but don't argue with me. Why don't you argue with God and argue with the Word of God? Argue with what He wrote about it, and then you can see for your own self. And I understand, the profession of pastors is a speaker. That's really what it is. And largely motivational. I
was going to say that.
It's largely motivational speaking. Why? Because the principles in the Bible are absolutely amazing. But I love it when I see people that understand and get the concept that our lives and our full-time work and at home is straight up ministry.
Yeah.
And there isn't this separation of
Yes.
serving God
Yes.
from a separate place.
Oh my gosh.
Abraham served God in everything he did. David served God in everything he did. They brought God with them into everything they did. It wasn't like, okay,
Yeah.
here's my profession, so this is where I act like that. No,
Right.
it's every day, all day, everywhere.
And that's even like putting God in a box. If you're like, oh, I only serve God when I'm
Right.
at church on Sunday or Wednesday or whatever, or like when I'm volunteering at this place or when I'm on the mission field, like that's the only time you're, holy or spiritual or serving God or whatever, versus like from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to
Your
bed.
entire life
And what was
is
that
beforehand.
quote? Yeah, and what was that quote? Francis of Assisi, I think, said this quote
yes.
that's like, preach the God. It's something along these lines. It's like, preach the gospel at all times, use words if necessary.
Yeah.
And it's just like,
Yes.
Mic drop.
yeah.
Like, just dwell on that. Like, just
Yeah.
think about that. Okay, and then, of course, like, you were writing in here about Mike Summers, who's a brand new client for this year, right? Incredible guy who using all the techniques that we teach at First Step Success and Creating a Dynasty. In fact, after his first steps, he increased his business $800,000. Well, he has a goal to be able to donate an entire year's worth of salary. Now, he has a national construction company, and in 4 weeks after his first steps, increased his income $850,000. Okay, so we're talking about a multi-million-dollar business. Do you understand what I'm saying? And he makes a lot of money. He makes a lot of money. And so to get to the place, his goal is to get to the place where that I could actually work and not make the money for myself, but to donate 100% of my salary for a year to what? Taking care of the poor, which is what all of our mandate is to do. All of our mandate is to take care of the poor, not just visit the poor and teach them songs. You're not going to find that in the Bible, to be honest with you.
God.
You're not going to find that in the Bible. Not at all. But what you will find in the Bible is that we are supposed to care for the poor, which is bringing medical supplies, bringing food, helping to teach them how to be self-sustained, giving them opportunity, like what we do in Africa, for example, where we have over 136 orphans that we've been caring for 18 years, to where we help them build a farm. So now the kids are learning to farm. They're learning to yield fruit and vegetation from the earth, and they're selling it. They're eating it themselves, and they're also selling it, so they're self-sustained. So they're not always going to need foreigners to give to them. So what we've done is help to establish them to where they can be self-sustaining. And not only that, these kids are learning a skill.
Yeah.
They know how to grow their own food now. These fathers and mothers know how not to starve. So that is doing what? Helping this next generation to do better, so that they're not going to end up in the same kind of poverty that they started in as orphans. And why? AIDS. Both parents are dead. They have no parents. And so that is our mandate. You're not going to find the mandate of ask your friends and family for money so that you can vacation around the world and go and teach people some new songs. You're not going to find that in the Bible. You just won't find that in the Bible. But you will find in the Bible taking care of the poor.
Yeah.
So when you worked at the church and you said you had fun with it, when did it hit you that, or I guess you said it was when you worked at the camp with these kids, that serving God was what? I mean, how did you come to that revelation? Because that is something that we teach,
Right.
which is a very rare thing. But how did you come to that revelation in your early 20s?
I think that I was seeing a disconnect between what I experienced at camp and what I was seeing in the church. It was a country club, really, is the best way that I can describe it. It's people that,
Oh, snap.
you come, you sit down, you stand up, you sit down, you stand up, you say all the right words, and then that's it. Like, there's nothing, that to me is not how I want to know the living God. That's not living to me. So it actually was my husband, was getting to know him before we were ever dating, the conversations that we were having, like understanding more and more. And the moment that I knew, like, this is my person, he said, I want the way that I react to people and the way that I live my life to be so different that people can't help but ask, like, what is it? That to me is ministry. That's living with God, out of God.
And where does that happen?
I mean, it could happen in churches, but it doesn't. That's not the end all be all. It
Oh my
happens.
gosh. I just thought of something. So you know that quote that's like, if you have to tell people you're a leader, you're not?
Right.
It's like, if you have to
Right.
tell people you're a Christian, then you're probably not acting enough like a Christian, because you shouldn't have to tell them,
Right.
like, well, I believe in this, da-da-da. It should just flow out of you and just be part of who you are. And you should probably have the fruit of the Spirit, honestly.
Right.
That's exactly what Jesus said.
Yeah.
What Yeshua said is that we would be known by our fruit, and we'd be
Mm-hmm.
known by our love, So when I said, like, where do we see that? Meaning his reactions. That would be his reaction at work.
Yeah.
That's his reaction at the
everything.
grocery store,
Yes.
right?
To everyone.
To everyone, to you, his wife, to his mother, to his
To
siblings,
stress, to good times, to hard times. Yeah.
to tragedy,
Mm-hmm.
to all of it. So we just wanted to encourage you today. I remember feeling, and I want to ask you guys, did you ever feel like you're nothing in the kingdom of heaven if you're not working in full-time ministry?
Yes.
Yes.
I went to, in the beginning years of my life, I went to, I was raised Catholic, so I went to Sunday school. And this was before I went to a Catholic school. But so during Sunday school, I just remember specifically like this one day, and I was in like 4th grade at the time, I think. And this one day in particular, when the teacher was saying, like, if you want to serve God, then you need to become a nun or a priest. And, of course, that's probably not all Sunday school teachers, probably not all Catholics are taught that, but that was what happened to be taught and said to me as a 4th grader during my Catholic Sunday school class. Wow. And
How did you feel about that? Like,
I was just kind of like, okay, so I guess I'm not going to be serving God. And that I was a 4th grader, so granted, I might be remembering that
But
wrong
still,
or
like,
whatever.
when you look at-
but that's the impression
Right,
that was on me for,
So when
long
you look
time.
at the nun's life, like, is that appealing?
No.
no.
Do you see what I mean? So it's like, okay, if you
Well,
want to
because
serve
I wanted
God-
to get married.
Right.
So, yeah.
Man, what a program.
Yeah.
So keep going. That's like profound to me.
Yeah, no, that was what I had heard. And I'm probably remembering that wrong, because it wasn't even being taught by a nun. It was taught by a teacher who, I'm pretty sure she was married. I don't remember. But anyway, regardless of whether that's exactly what she said or that was her intention or not, because she wasn't even a nun, that's what, like, and was just constantly seemed to be reinforced over and over throughout my life growing up in the Catholic Church, was that I had to be, like, if you want to truly be, like, holy or whatever, then you need to be a nun or a priest. And so it was just kind of like, man, well, I don't really want to do that. Now, there's this other teaching in Catholicism, if I'm remembering correctly, of, like, a vocation or something like that, which is, like, every person is called to something, and whether it's, whatever it is. But anyway, so some, like, contrarian beliefs, I guess, but I definitely remember growing up feeling like, oh, I need to do something, like, in the church, or I'm a bad person if I don't,
I'm not
whatever.
good. I'm not good enough.
Right.
If I don't, and then there's also the question of, like, gosh, what if I'm called to working at a gas station?
Right.
Does that mean
Yeah,
that God
right.
doesn't
Right.
think I'm good enough to be a nun? Does that mean that God thinks that I'm not I'm not, like, talented enough to be a priest? Does that mean that I'm somehow, like, 3rd or 4th rate and just completely unqualified to be his servant if I'm not a nun?
Yeah.
What
Or
about-
even, like, the vote, just, sorry, real quick.
No,
I'm gonna
go
let
ahead.
you talk, is just the, with the whole, like, one person is meant for everything. So first of all, that adds the pressure of, what if I don't work in what I'm meant for? Like, what if I don't find it? What if I spend my whole life searching and I don't find the one singular thing that I'm made for? And then also just, like, well, what if my friend has this really cool thing that they're meant for and I'm just meant for, like, something
Working at a
lame
gas
that I
station.
don't like. Yeah, like, something lame, and they're meant to be, like, something awesome, like, I don't even know what, but anyway. So, the comparison thing there was lame.
What about you, Trisha?
I probably was taught something similar, and I think that it didn't like connect until I was so much older. And so I I felt a lot of pride that I did work in full-time ministry.
Nice.
Right? Like, I did all the right things, and I, like, you know, I
So tell me, it's like, I work for a church.
right.
Lord.
That was kind of my attitude about it, which is gross and not, you know, I've learned a lot since then, but that was how I thought about it.
Oh my gosh.
That I'm chosen.
That's funny.
because I work in a church.
Well, and that's probably why a lot of these, you know, missionary type people who are like raising support and all this stuff are like are okay with not having necessarily a traditional job, is because they're like, oh well, I am doing something holy
good.
And
Yes.
And I gotta tell you, and I hate this because we're gonna get just slaughtered for this,
probably.
but churches and organizations have done a really good job at marketing the importance of having some kind of church affiliation. They've done a really good job at branding and positioning, which are marketing terms. So you brand something and you identify that thing, and then you can speak specifically to that thing, and then you can motivate that thing, and you can draw that thing, even to leave what makes perfect sense. But they can draw you in because of the branding. And then same with the positioning. So it's all about how we spin something to sound more important than working. And so I said in the very beginning of the show that I was going to share some personal experiences. So as an employer, I've been employing people for 30 years. I can't even believe I can say that.
It's okay. You don't look it.
She gets paid to say that.
Oh my gosh.
She doesn't. That's really sweet coming from a 20-something-year-old. Anyway, so, but for 30 years, I've been employing people. And what's interesting is what I've seen come across my desk are resumes and or inquiries that people make that have been in full-time ministry, you know, whether it's on the mission field or they've been a part of, you know, a school of ministry of this and that or whatever. And then when it comes down to it, I'm searching because companies hire skill set. They hire skill and attitude. And sadly, these kids who have spent 10 years raising support have no skills. And they're almost unmarketable when it comes time to like provide for their family. And, you know, when the support dries up, which it does happen, it happens to people, it happens to more people than it doesn't happen for. There are very, very few that have been able to hit the jackpot, if you will, and have figured out. And I've noticed recently with some who are in ministry where they're teaching them how to go build relationship with people so that they can raise support. They're finally figuring out that when you're just sending a text message, hey, support me, I want to go to Belize, and it's a trip, it's going to cost this much. You know, I got one recently, like, hey, our church is going to Israel, I have to raise $3,000, is there any way that you can help me? Like, get a job. That's how I can help you. Get a job. That's my advice to help you. Get a job. Go scrub some toilets. Go wash some cars. Go pick up a night shift as a waitress somewhere. Go work 3 jobs. You will get so much more out of that trip if you actually have to work with blood, sweat, and tears for that experience. You're going to get 1,000 times more out of it than if somebody just pays your way and it's a free vacation to Israel.
Yes.
And so, anyway, so my experience has been that those who are now in their 30s, they're unmarketable. They're not being able to find anything because it really does suck. It really absolutely sucks. And again, where does it start? From the branding and the positioning when they're young. And it's the same thing. It's like if you want to be holy, if you want to be special, if you really want to serve God, then that means you have to do something that's associated with the church. Well, that's a great marketing plan right there. It's like, wow, I get to hire people for next to nothing and or they're going to work for free and they're not going to get paid for anything, and they're going to help me build my brand called XYZ Church, and they're going to help me build my ministry called ABC Church or ABC Ministry or whatever foundation that it is. And so then what ends up happening is that everyone's doing some kind of service that has very little skill. It's like the same old service that it takes to clean a house. And so I just want you to know that I personally have had to deny applicants because, I mean, great people, wonderful heart, no skill. And I can't pay $50,000 a year for no skill. I'm not even going to pay $15 an hour for no skill. It has to have skill, which is what I loved about you, Trisha. You know, you had a journalism degree. I mean, you're an amazing writer, awesome with content, and you are a learner. You love to learn, and you've really learned our culture, our values. You've learned our content and have really done a great job, where I've had other people who, meaning, honestly, when I see applicants come in that I worked at a church, it's like, oh. What does that generally mean? It means half-hearted work. It means no skill set. It means lots of excuses. I don't feel called to come to work today. I was in prayer. Like, you're fired.
And I was very blessed that I found a job that was created almost for somebody with my skill set. Because for exactly what you said, they needed somebody to brand them. That's what I did marketing for them. They needed someone. They needed a brand to be able to market to people.
Yeah. And I can even say from the perspective of somebody, because I've done the whole raising support. Like I raised $5,000 for myself to go, or $5,600 or something. Anyway, it was for this 9-month like ministry type thing, which was great, and I learned a lot, and I met some amazing people, and I did some awesome stuff, and I
worked for free,
and worked exactly, and that's what I was going to say. Is I was working like crazy, getting barely any sleep because I felt like I like owed something, and I have to say, like, yes, we impacted people, yes, we changed lives, absolutely. And it was an amazing time, and I had so much fun while I was there, and I'm still in contact with a lot of the people to this day, and I love them, and they're all amazing people with amazing hearts. But that in comparison to knowing that every day that I get to go to work, and so there's the big side of it of the company that I work for. We have a mission of changing 100 million lives by 2035. So there's that, and then also knowing every dollar that I make, 10% of that is going straight to building homes for the extreme poor, for freeing kids out of the sex trade, whatever, like that for me, personally means more than, something that, I don't know, the other stuff that I was doing, which not trying to diss it or saying that it's bad, because I did learn a lot there and got, some amazing relationships and all this good stuff. But for me, the fulfillment of work is so much greater when I'm like earning something and then being able to turn around and put that earning towards something that's really meaningful and is going to change generations, versus just
teaching some songs.
Right. Well, or whatever it happened to be.
Right. Whatever it happened.
Yeah, because it wasn't teaching songs, but it was some other stuff.
You were dancing.
I was dancing and singing. Absolutely.
Yes, lots of skits.
Yes, lots of skits.
Lots and lots of skits.
And lots of hours of work.
Crazy hours.
Yes.
Yeah.
Insane.
Okay, so listen, I don't want you to get the wrong idea of this conversation, because it'd be very easy to do. We are not against missionaries.
Not at all. I donated just a few weeks ago to one.
Exactly. We are not against missionaries. That's not what we're saying. We are, however, if you want to support missionaries, I'd be asking more questions. I would definitely be asking more questions, and I'd be looking for proof, and I would be holding them accountable for their own heart. The other thing is I want you to actually look at, wow, how much are you putting towards missions, which is, by the way, not in the Bible. It doesn't exist. You're not going to find it. Go ahead, search it, find it. Show me where the mission trip is, okay? And you might say, well, Paul did a mission trip. No, he actually moved to Rome, and he built saddles. He started a business in Rome, and he preached the gospel while he was working. He showed the love of Yeshua. He told the story of Yeshua every day, all day at work. That's what he did. Abraham lived out the love of the Father. The way he led, you can see it. You can see all the way through any words that he spoke, the way he led his family, the way he led his coworkers, the way that he led his employees, the way he did business dealings, even with heads of nations. The way he lived it out was he lived out the good news of salvation of the God of Israel in his everyday dealings, and also how he managed money. Same with Moses, okay? So this is how they lived it out, friend. So I'm not against missions. I support a lot of different things. But I will tell you, you will not find missions in the Bible, but you will find taking care of the poor. You will find helping them. You will find feeding them. You will find sustaining them. You will also find sustaining the widow, the foreigner. You will find that clearly. And churches put more of a focus on missions instead of actually feeding the poor in their own local city. So that I do have a problem with. I will just very gladly, very boldly just say that right now. However, I don't want you to get the wrong side of this conversation. The part of the conversation is if you are going to give to missions, hold those people accountable. It is important.
Yes.
Number 2, don't feel obligated. But you better feel obligated to taking care of the poor. You better feel obligated for that. Mm-hmm. Next, this is not a conversation about putting down on the church. This is about putting up on the real church. And who's the real church? It's you. Mm-hmm. It's you. Yeah. It's not the branded, positioned, nice...
it's not the building.
That too. It's not the building.
That's not what you were going to say.
Mm-hmm. It's not the... Forget it. Anyway, I'm going to just keep it in my mouth.
Don't want to get in trouble.
Anyway, it's not the swinging of a thing to cause people. And again, I don't think that any pastor or any one of these organizations do this on purpose with a bad heart.
Right heart. Yeah.
It's the right heart. I don't know that the methods are correct. Mm-hmm. And it's the spinning of the truth. Mm-hmm. To spin it in the direction of where someone wants another person to go. Yeah. And so when I'm looking at this whole missions thing, what I am saying is that if you are somebody that you're a missionary and you happen to stumble on this and it's super late at night and you're with your phone and you're under the covers right now and you are mad as a hornet with me, take this one piece of advice. Search the Bible yourself. Number 2, if you want to get money from a friend, you might want to have a relationship. Sending one text message a year only asking for money and having no relationship is flat out against the gospel of Yeshua. That is straight up wrong. That is not loving your neighbor. That is getting and not giving. Yeah. There's no honor in that. There's absolutely no honor in that. So if you want support, you've got to give according to what Jesus said, according to the Father, Yahweh said, that we have to give in order to receive. So what are you giving to the people you're asking from? We're like, I have nothing to give. I'm a poor missionary. Well, you might want to think of something, and it obviously isn't money that they need from you, but it could be honor. How about some respect instead of being used like an ATM machine? Don't use your friends and family as an ATM machine. Like, truly put something into that relationship if you plan on drawing anything from that relationship. Mm-hmm. That is one form of advice if you're a missionary. Above all, take care of the poor. Yes. And know this, and this is really the entire point of the whole conversation. You, the believer, you're the church. You don't have to work for a church in order to be super spiritual. Be like Abraham, yes, who we are still talking about to this day. 4,000 years after he's gone, we're still talking about Abraham. Be like Moses. 3,500 years later, we're still talking about him. Be like King David. None of these guys worked for a ministry. None of them had a degree in ordination papers. None of them did a mission trip nor raised support for a mission trip. Not a single one of the greatest of faiths in all of the Bible did that. No, Danny, Paul did. No, Paul was imprisoned. And somebody came and brought him food because back in that time, in fact, still around the world, it's this way, that if you get thrown in prison in Nicaragua, your friends and family are supposed to bring you food. There's places all over. In Africa, same thing. Like if you're going to eat, someone has to bring you the food. The prison system does not feed you. They don't water you and they don't clothe you. That was the same during Paul's time. And there's still countries to this day it's the same way. So here was Paul. He was imprisoned. And if he was going to eat, someone had to bring him food. So he was writing letters saying, thank you for contributing to my needs while I was in prison. And somehow that has been spun to, you're supposed to give a tithe to this building so we can keep the lights on. And we can put a pastor in $1 million home or $10 million or $15 million or $20 million home.
Your employer's your sponsor. To go do in your free time the whatever stuff you want.
Exactly. So bottom line is that you are the church. And be like Daniel, who worked for a leader. And he was the best, him and his buddies, 3 of them, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These guys were workers. They were literal workers, and they were the best, and they were also very gorgeous, the Bible says. It says that they were very well put together. They were handsome. They were fine men, and they were healthy, and they were strong. These guys were set apart. It was obvious that they took care of themselves. It was obvious that they were diligent at things, and they were hired to be advisors, and they did a really good job with being advisors. Okay, so be like what the Bible says and live out your Father's ways and your Father's traditions. Live out his teaching instead of man's teaching, man's interpretation of what it is. I believe this is why so many people feel so completely unfulfilled.
Yeah.
I know for me, man, I literally felt like never will God use me. Never will I be good enough. Never, because I don't fit into these people's molds of a pastor's kid who became a pastor. So-and-so who graduated from ORU, and so-and-so who has a degree in theology and in Hebrew and in Greek. I'm like, I can't even understand the book right now, let alone even thinking about jumping through those hoops and becoming that person. And more importantly, that's why I asked you the question. It's like when the nun says that, or when a teacher says that, in order to be holy, you got to be a nun. You're like, I'd rather die. I don't want that life, right? And the same. So when I would look at Christians, I'm like,
I don't want to be broke.
I don't want to be, not only to be broke, but I don't want to act like those people. They have like a different language, and you can't relate to them, and they're nose in the air, look like they've been like baptized in vinegar. Like, they don't look happy. They look like they never have sex with their spouse. Their kids are miserable. Like,
they're always yelling at the waitress.
they're
Whatever.
rude on Sunday at a restaurant. Like, you know what I mean? You look at their life. I remember looking at their lives and going, God, do I have to act like that to be used by you?
No.
And the answer's no. Look at how he used Mary Magdalene, a former whore, prostitute. We still talk about her to this day. We still talk about the mercy in which she received from him and the love she expressed from that. And who Jesus chose, who the Father actually chose to be the first to come to the tomb. Yeah, the former whore, the former prostitute. Man, I just love him. So you're qualified, friend. You're his child. You're his child, and he has you strategically placed exactly where you're at, whether that's in a gas station or in a public school or a private school. Or if it's at a manufacturing plant, or you're a flight attendant, or you're working under cars all day, or it doesn't matter what you're, contractor, construction work, dentist, doctor, doesn't matter what you do. Guess what? You're his chosen vessel. Ordained for, by the way, ministry doesn't even exist in the Bible. Wasn't that a shocker? And the definition of how we've defined it. No, to minister is to help, to serve is what that actually means, right? And so you are there as his ambassador. Yes. You're also in your home as his ambassador for love, his ambassador for truth, his ambassador for hope. That's what you are. That's what you bring. So now go and read the Bible from cover to cover, seeing it without that you thought Abraham went to get his ordination papers. Read it without the scales, that David wears some kind of robe that has a white thing right here. And he talks like this. Okay, I want you to look at it with even, like, go to the evangelical side, that, Deborah didn't, preach like some of the female preachers that we're seeing on television, okay? There wasn't a God.
Oh my gosh.
Okay? There's not this extra syllable. Okay? It's not there. Right? So just read it as normal people, just like you and me. You're his chosen.
Yes.
Express that in what you do. What you do is so important. You have a people, if you're working at the gas station, that are tied to your life. Share the love of your Father to them on a daily basis in your responses, as Trisha was saying her husband was talking about. Live it out this way. We will be known by his love, not by how we dress, not by how we act on a Sunday, not by sitting down, standing up, sitting down, standing up. That's not what it says. Okay, these are the traditions of man. We're to be known by our love. So I think we've thoroughly,
Probably, yeah. All right.
We're way
Time
past
to
our
go.
time. It is time to go. But this was like so rich and so fun. And by the way, if you like enjoyed this conversation, comment to us. Tell us. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your thoughts. And if you think we're totally wrong, blast us out.
Please
Just
do.
Yes.
blast us out. Tell us how wrong we are. We want to hear your perspective. We're
Yeah.
not looking for everyone to agree with us. We know that there's amazing pastors, amazing churches, amazing ministries, all of that's out there. Some of them which are our friends and our clients that we
Yeah.
love, that we honor, that we respect. And we know that people get into that line of work, profession, because they want to do good.
Totally.
But there's the rest of us that felt the way we felt and feel it's important for that part of the conversation to be exposed, and to say to those of you who are like that, like,
Yeah.
hey,
You're
baby,
not alone.
you ain't alone, baby.
Yes.
You don't have to go act like that. Nope, you probably will lead more to the Father than some of them who are trying to act the part. Just be you. He loves who you are. So that's it for us. Bye.
If this episode was an encouragement to you, go to DannyJohnson.com and share it with your friends now. You never know who else needs to hear it. This has been The Danny Johnson Show. Join us every weekday at 7 a.m. for more insight.